Imagine working in France in the mid-1900s and you hear about some kid who says that he sees things. You just brush it off as childhood nonsense and you carry on with your life. A couple years later, you hear that that same child got a private audience with the Pope, and the meeting influenced a critical dogma of the church. What is that little boy's story? Howdy, y'all, and welcome back to another episode of the Sanctified Podcast, the show where we normally explore the stories of various saints throughout history, learn about what they did, and how we came to recognize them as saints today. But today we're going to mix it up a little bit. The person we're exploring isn't a recognized saint, but his story offers a compelling reason to make him one. Today, we're going to explore the life of Gilles Bouhours, an uncanonized visionary. And sorry if I mispronounced his name, I tried looking it up, I'm pretty sure I got it, but if I don't, let me know. Gilles Bouhours was born November 27th, 1944, in Mayenne, France. His family was by no means remarkable or well-off. His father, Gabriel Bouhours, was a plumber, and his mother, Madeleine, was a stay-at-home mom. Gilles was the third of 5 children, but when he was just 9 months old, he was diagnosed with meningoencephalitis, which was usually a fatal diagnosis at this time. It is the inflammation of the brain and the meninges of the spinal column simultaneously, and this is also when the very first incredible event of Gilles' life happened. His parents sought help from a nun that they were friends with, and she gave them 2 images of saints with relics, and she told him to put them under his pillow and pray. One was of a missionary, possibly his great-uncle, we'll revisit that later, and the other was of Therese of the Child Jesus. For 3 nights they did this, but nothing happened, and then after the 4th night, Gilles' parents found him totally healed and with all signs of the sickness gone, something unheard of. Now, you might be saying, that doesn't prove anything about him, that just verifies what we already knew about the other saints. And you're right. But, and it's a big but, that was just the beginning for little Gilles Bouhours. Remember, he wasn't even a year old at that point. He likely couldn't even recognize what had happened. Or maybe somehow he did. When he was just 2 years old, almost 3, so in 1947, he experienced something that probably no other 2-year-old has experienced, or experienced and understood at least. On September 30th, Gilles had a vision of the Virgin Mary, and that was just the beginning of his visions. He said that Mary told him to go to Espis, north of Moissac in the department of Tarn-et-Garonne in the Diocese of Montauban, the same place that 3 children and a middle-aged man said that they saw Mary in May 1946. But alas, Bishop Pierre-Marie Théas deemed those 4 claims false. But he omitted Gilles' name from that list. Why? Well, the answer is disappointingly simple. It's because of the time that he visited Espis. It's not just because he was 2 or 3 that he didn't visit. He actually had more visions from Mary saying not to visit just yet. Just a few months later, in May of 1847, Bishop Théas said that any priest celebrating Mass in Espis faces the risk of being suspended ad divinis. Basically, stripped of their ability to celebrate Mass or other religious activities. Now, before you jump the gun and say, man, that guy's a jerk, he actually was a very well-respected and even won the Righteous Among the Nations award for his devotion to help the victims of World War II. So, he was a good guy. On October 13th, Gilles finally went to Espis after waiting because Mary told him to wait and honor Bishop Théas' order. Just a few years later, Théas left as bishop of the diocese, and Louis de Courage Douzetot filled in. On February 1st, 1950, he also investigated the 4 who had the vision, and he reached the same conclusion as Théas, but he omitted Gilles. Of course, people still heard the story surrounding Gilles, and they reached their own conclusions. Largely, they lumped him in with the other 4, but if he should have been included with them, why did Louis de Courage Douzetot leave him out? Perhaps because there was something more to Gilles' story that prevented his visions from being declared false. Because remember, this is 1950, so this was after Gilles had his visions, after they were known. So the new bishop was definitely aware of them, but he still chose to omit Gilles. And there's probably good reason, and we're going to get there. The Virgin appeared to Gilles pretty frequently, usually every month, if not more often, and it was usually on the 13th, which just so happens to be the day that the visions for the children of Fatima were. Mary appeared to them on the 13th of each month, and this seems, at least to me, a little more than just a coincidence. There is a story that during the August vision, a woman had given Gilles 3 rosaries to be blessed by the Virgin herself. But when August 13th rolled around and Gilles asked Mary to bless them, she told him that she couldn't because they already were blessed. When Gilles and his father returned to the woman, they told her what Mary had said, and the woman was a bit shocked because they in fact had been blessed before, but she didn't tell anybody that. She just gave them to him. I don't know if it was a test or if she just didn't think that they could be double blessed. In any case, that's a good indicator that this isn't just some random kid making stuff up. And then just a couple of days after that event, Gilles had another vision. This time he saw the earth, which he just called a button because he couldn't really tell. He was just a little child at this point, remember? But he saw the earth with a grotesque beast encircling it. But there was a man with feathers on his back approaching. And his description perfectly fits Michael the Archangel fighting Satan's evil grasp on the world. Something that would possibly be a little tricky for such a young child to comprehend. They might know the stories, but to have such a detailed and elaborate vision is pretty out there. And then in December of this same year, Gilles had another vision. December 13th, 1948, he said that he received a message from Mary directly for the Pope. December 13th also happens to be St. Lucy's feast day. Coincidence? Maybe. Maybe not. Even though Gilles was just a child, he insisted on needing to see the Pope privately to relay the message. His family didn't really have the means to afford a journey to Rome, but they found a way, and his father took him. On December 12th, 1949, so essentially 1 year later, almost to the day, Gilles met with the Pope. But there were others around, and Gilles said that Mary told him to tell the Pope in private, so he would not tell anybody else what the secret was until he told the Pope privately. So Gilles and his father left unsuccessfully. They tried again to obtain a meeting with the Pope, but it was really difficult, especially because of the other 4 people who have claimed to have seen Mary. Whether they did or didn't, everybody believed they didn't, and it's pretty much widely accepted that they didn't. Gilles, he's separate from this. He did see Mary, and many just lumped him into those other 4 because they just didn't know better at the time, which would have made him the 5th, but he was clearly not a part of those 4. Finally, they were successful in setting up a second meeting with the Pope, which is pretty crazy for a father and his young child to have 2 private audiences with the Pope within a couple of years of each other. That's awesome. On May 1st, 1950, Gilles finally got his private meeting with Pope Pius XII and told him the secret. What was the secret that Gilles so critically needed to tell the Pope in private? Well, Gilles actually revealed it right after his meeting, because he was just told to keep it a secret to tell the Pope, and then as a child, once he fulfilled his promise, he was happy to share it with everybody else. It was a simple, yet profound and compelling message. It was, the Blessed Virgin Mary is not dead. She ascended to heaven in body and soul. Now, you might be thinking, what's so special about that? We already knew she was in heaven. The important distinction is that she is their body and soul. Pope Pius XII had been asking God for a sign to confirm the proclamation of the dogma of the Assumption. It had been long debated if Mary died or if she ascended into heaven without bodily death. Now, first we need to understand that in the Catholic Church, a dogma is something that has been revealed by God through divine revelation. It's basically something that God shared. So obviously it is true and should be accepted. It's not something that the Pope or Church just decided they liked and were like, we're adding this in. It's something undeniably true. So this message from Mary that Gilles relayed to the Pope was the answer to his years of prayers for an answer on that exact subject. Therefore, it became a dogma because God sent Mary in a vision to Gilles for this purpose. It was a direct message. It was very clear, and it was not an interpretation or reading or anything like that. And there is a lot more to the whole dogma. It's kind of complicated and long to repeat here, but I'll include a link below if you want to read the whole thing. And it's directly from the Vatican's website. It's not just some random person's interpretation of it. And after this, Gilles was still visited by Mary pretty often. On some of those visits, she would bring baby Jesus in her arms. Other times it was just her, and other times she was accompanied by other saints like St. Joseph, St. Teresa of Lisieux, who you might recall was the same saint that his parents prayed to when he was younger to save his life. So there's an interesting connection there that I think at least reinforces the validity and truth of all of these events. And sometimes she visited with St. Bernadette. The last visit that Gilles received from Mary was August 15th, 1958. Throughout this time, a conviction to become a priest grew in him, and it was really all that he wanted to do. And Mary told him that soon her visits would come to an end, and he was okay with that. He still just wanted to become a priest. He wanted to be close to God. He wanted to serve the Lord, just like his great uncle had. He was a missionary in Vietnam. And that's why I say maybe that was one of the saints that they prayed to. Maybe he's not a recognized saint, but they still prayed to him, and some records got mixed up. It's just my theory. It's not fact. He cherished a little wooden cross from his uncle all the time. He always brought it with him everywhere he went. But God had other plans for little Gilles. He wasn't destined to be a priest. Less than 2 years later, Gilles found himself fighting for his life at just the young age of 15. He caught something severe on February 24th, 1960, and just 2 days later, that battle took his life. It is still debated among doctors if it was extremely severe asthma or if it was a crisis of uremia. The latter is the presence of exceedingly high levels of urea in the blood. Normally that's expelled in urine, but for some reason there are times where the body just stops doing that, and it leads to renal failure, and getting to that point is just a miserable existence with the symptoms and conditions that go along with it. Little Gilles is buried in Salon, France, and though he doesn't have a formal pilgrimage destination because, remember, he's not a saint, he's not even beatified yet, I'm sure there are people who visit, especially people who are very devoted to Mary, because personally these visions are pretty indisputable to me. And that's why, in 2014, Archbishop of Toulouse, Robert Legault, started an inquiry into beatifying little Gilles Bouhours. Based off of his visions alone and his service to the Pope and faith, I think it should be pretty clear cut, but because of all the other controversy surrounding other visions around his time, it's still under investigation. Now, when recalling what Gilles was like, his brother said that he was often available for any sacrifice, small or great, in order always to please the Blessed Virgin or the little Jesus, because remember, she came with baby Jesus frequently. He often deprived himself of sweets, and he helped at home, even when he would have preferred to come play with us. Gilles was often for us an example to follow, both spiritually and in everyday life. He accepted everything and offered to the good Lord and the Blessed Virgin all his sufferings, especially during the winter period when his hands and tip of his feet were deformed by very strong chilblains. But he never had a word to complain. So you can see from his brother's recollection that Gilles was an incredibly devoted person. Even as just a little child, all he wanted to do was serve the Lord, be close to God and Mary and Jesus, and that was his whole life. And everybody could see that, and everybody was inspired by it. He was a remarkable child. If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll do my best to answer them. So what do you think of Gilles Bouhours? Do you think that he's going to be canonized? And if you do, when do you think it'll be? I hope you found his story interesting, and I look forward to learning your thoughts on Gilles Bouhours. Thanks for listening. And a special thank you to Leonida Chavez for recommending that I look into the life of little Gilles Bouhours. He's truly a remarkable child with an incredible story that really does need to be shared. And over the coming weeks, I'm actually going to be branching out into some people who are undergoing the process of canonization. I've received a few requests to explore some who are not yet recognized as saints, but they're on the path to becoming saints, and they have really incredible stories too. If you'd like to support the channel, you can subscribe, download the episode, like, comment, share with your friends, or send me a suggestion on a saint to check out by emailing me at sanctifiedpodcast@proton.me. You can find my show on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Podbean, and more. I upload once a week, every Thursday. Take care, and have a wonderful day.